So hi everyone. I would think I'm gonna start now. It's a little bit past 3 and people are still joining, but I would like to start with saying hi and a warm welcome to all of you to this session on nurturing our inner development through collaborative learning and the IDGs, the inner development goals. So I'm Therese from Blixen, and on behalf of the IDGs of Catalyst 2030 and the Catalyst Collabs, I want to say that we're absolutely thrilled to be here with you. And we have actually 156 people registered from across the world, and you've been here to these Catalyst 2030 sessions before. You know this geographical reach, but and that it's not unusual, but it's still, you see, I love it. It gets me every time. And I will be your moderator today, and together with Daniel Therese from the Inner Development Goals, who I will introduce very, very shortly. But hi, Daniel. And today we also have with us from Catalyst 2030, Debbie Brock, who is the Assistant Learning Facilitator, and Komin again, and Mary Usman, who are amazing interns from the Catalyst 2030 office, and they are our tech wizards behind the scenes, are very important people who we would not be able to be without. And just starting with some housekeeping and briefly the schedule for these 75 minutes that we will be together is that you will learn more about the inner development goals, or the IDGs as we call them, from Daniel, and not only what they are, but also how we all can benefit from them and how we can engage ourselves. And then we will also have a breakout room for discussions in a while, and then a Q&A where we really will be looking forward to your questions. And so I would now like to introduce Daniel Therese to you. And Daniel is part of the global leadership team of the Inner Development Goals. And for more than 15 years, he's been working at the intersection of technology and business, the community, social innovation, human-centered design, and as an activist, innovator, and social entrepreneur. He also works as a facilitator for transformational workshops, and he designs and hosts experiences that connect to others, self, and nature. And one thing that we have in common is that he's passionate about co-creating a beautiful future of graceful and equitable new paths that regenerate the natural world and our inner ecologies and our collective spirits. So my first question to you, Daniel, would be, so what is this leadership team of the Inner Development Goals? And can you elaborate a little bit then on what the IDGs are?
Thank you so much for the kind introduction, Therese. And sometimes when I hear this, I'm like, who is this guy? I know that my daughter, when she's asked what I actually do, all that she says is blah, blah, blah. So that was definitely a very nice way of putting it. What is the IDGs and what is the leadership team? Well, the leadership team is the small group of people who are kind of trying to bring the IDGs forward into its mission. But where did the IDGs really come from? And that has actually been a conversation that has been happening for over 10 years on a little island in the Stockholm archipelago. And it was all centered around the simple idea, simple insight, actually, that it seems unlikely that we will reach the goals, whether it's the Sustainable Development Goals, or if we frame it as a transition, sustainable or regenerative transition that we need to go through. That these ambitions for external change are unlikely to manifest themselves without a corresponding change inside.
I'm a Libra.
I think there's someone on unmuted. Okay, there we go. And that's because our challenges, they're not just complicated, but they're actually complex. And I mean, this is probably not the crowd that I need to really
I'm not the best person to advise you on.
I'm sorry, Daniel.
I think there is someone.
Tracy, yeah. Tracy, can you please mute? For some reason, I can't mute her. Thank you. Sorry about that, Daniel.
Oh, not a problem. it's that I think has to be part of a Zoom meeting. I think for sure I'm also going to get to the point where I'm going to be on mute while I'm actually speaking. So well, I was just saying that this is actually because there is this recognition that the challenges we're facing in trying to make a better future is that they're not just complicated, but they're complex. And probably here, this is not the crowd where I really need to explain it, but I mean, if we're looking at complicated challenges, those are really I think the challenges that our industrial society has largely been concerned with and has been built around. But complexity, and I mean, we have different words for it. We have, like, we call them complex problems or adaptive problems or wicked problems. And those often require a different toolbox. And part of that toolbox is that we are also looking at the force for change, at the intervener, and see what is their internal condition, or how are they coming and applying themselves to this change. And when I say that, I also would like to just note that when we say inner development goals, it's not just about inner as in personal, inside of one person, but it's also inside of our organizations, inside of our institutions. So then we quickly are talking about culture. And I'm always inspired by this one saying by Angel Kyoto Williams, who was like one of the transforming or the voices in this transformative social change movement, who said, without inner change, there can be no outer change. And without collective change, no change really matters. And I think that's probably what the IDGs really at the core come down to. And Therese, I also remembered that, you know, we're not just part of like the same network here at Catalyst. We've actually been on a call previously together many years ago around the Catalyst Awards, I remember. I mean, I didn't stay on that committee, but I know you've also been part of this network for a really long time. You're one of the founding members of Catalyst. You've also founded the collabs. And I mean, that really means that the people from this network here, they're not just coming here out of nowhere. They usually have really a wealth of experience in this sector and really this deep dedication for change. And I'm wondering, how did you arrive at this topic of looking at what is that inner change that we need to leverage for that external change we're seeking?
Well, that's a big question. You know, I've been in the social entrepreneur world, the NGO world, the funder world, and I visited the corporate world on purpose to learn about that and apply lessons learned in the corporate sector for about 25 years across the world. And if there's one thing that defines me as a person, it's that I'm really passionate about collaboration and also intercultural communication, be it between all sectors, be it between NGOs or, you know, cross-sectorial between business and NGOs, or religious or governmental. So there's a lot of soul searching and banging my head against the wall in what I think should be the change in the world. And sometimes I feel like this old tired warrior, but because of this, I was invited to the founding meeting of Catalyst 2030 in England at the Althorp House just before the pandemic, and we became one of its founding members. And that's how I'm connected to the Catalyst movement, which I just love how it has grown. And about the inner development goals, I attended the first IDG conference, which was held at the concert hall here in Stockholm, where I'm sitting. And I was blown away by the impact it had not only on me, but also seemingly on everybody else in the audience around me. And this is a very large concert hall where they have their Nobel Prize ceremonies, for example. And in the audience, people were crying around me that did the practices that the team from the stage were leading people through that day. And the conference was very, very professional. And what I liked that there was such a mix of people in the audience, not only like the already enlightened people, if you say so, but also representatives from business and government, etc. And that was really, really healthy. and of high quality, which spoke to me. And I felt these people I can collaborate with. So since then, I'm a bit engaged in the IDGs. I don't work with them, but I fully support them, because also the whole idea of the inner development goals makes sense to me. And they should be the goal zero behind all the 17 goals, because we have to connect to our inner to understand what other change we need to create. Because even if you worked with this for 25 years, or if you're starting, or as a person who does not work in this world, like it's not until it hits you in the face that you realize that you have to create a change, and then sometimes it's often too late. So we don't understand what we have to do, and that's why it's taking so long to reach the sustainable development goals. So this whole thing of really connecting with your inner to understand where we're going it just makes total sense. And I also know that, Daniel, you were, just like you said, you were part of the Catalyst 2030 network for a while. So what's your personal story with, like, how you arrived here and with the inner development goals? I'm really curious to hear more about you as a person as well.
So yeah, I think most people in the space here for inner development, probably every good story has to start with a burnout, right? And well, mine was in 2016. But if I roll that back a little bit, I mean, I had been enthusiastic about social entrepreneurship really from 2007, when I encountered the books of Muhammad Yunus. And I just got heavily engaged. I co-created an organization that taught people how to run these innovation workshops for social entrepreneurs. And it became a whole thing, maybe even a mini movement. I was active also in the climate movement. I was living in Berlin back at the time, and we were doing this demonstration where we would put DJs on electric cars, and we would have them play their music via these silent disco headphones and walk dancing through the city. And like, how much more Berlin can a demonstration really be? And it got me into a position where I got to kind of travel the world and speak on stages and, tell people about the future. But then 2016 happened, and, Brexit, Trump, all of that. And I didn't have that on my radar. And I just really thought to myself, like, you know nothing. Like, really, who are you to go around and talk to people around the future? Maybe it's better that you actually listen for a change. And so it got me into, like, really a very like a crisis mode, I think. And it ended up with me just really looking for direction. And I think I found that by following a call to move to Barcelona, where I'm calling you from today, where I joined a small UN office, where I was like, okay, finally, they can just tell me what needs to happen for change to really to come. And I can just, sit in my little corner working on that. But I don't know about you, but as I was going through that, I, like, also was learning about all the little dysfunctions in that system as well. And I mean, I had been going from probably even before COP21, like, into the streets talking about systems change, not climate change. But I didn't really have any idea what systems change really meant. And so I went deeper into that. And I think for me, it just became also a very spiritual exploration, like an exploration of myself and my background and my purpose. And then there was another transformation that I was going through, that I became a father in 2018. And that's really where I connected with this idea that this meaningful change needs to include also a transformation of the inner. And so for me, that meant that I would start over once again on a new path, and I was quitting what I was doing. So I stopped working for the UN, and I really wanted to be present also for our daughter and be a father. And it was a hugely healing time. I learned a lot about myself during this time. But if we fast forward a little bit from there, I found myself at this event called the Wellbeing Summit for Social Change. And I actually signed up for it because I thought, I'm not really going to know anyone. I don't know many people on the program or so. This is going to be really exciting. But when I actually showed up there, I connected with a lot of people that I had been on this path with in the change-making space. And they had gone through similar transformations. And we found ourselves really being in conversation around the inner, around some deeply personal topics and how this is affecting our worldview and how we see things. And it was just a really nourishing space. There was like really powerful talks. I even had the chance to kind of have this conversation with Satish Kumar away from the crowds.
Mm.
And it really touched me deeply. And kind of on the way home from that event, I really heard this call to kind of get back into the space. And, you know, with all that I had, you know, gone through and changed and that I had become. And so a couple of months later, there was an opportunity to join the IDG team, and I just really grabbed it.
Wow. Thank you for that story and about who you are. So how do the IDGs contribute then to making change? How do you feel that your work and the IDGs
Yeah.
themselves, how can you tell us a little bit more about then what the IDGs have become and what you've seen?
So yeah, I mean, the IDGs, as I mentioned, they came out of this exploration of this conversation with this awareness that we also need to look at the inner if we want that external change. And one of the people in that conversation and one of the founders in a way of the IDGs, he wrote a book that actually explored why the Nordics developed in a bit of a different way when with the Industrial Revolution than much of the Anglo-Saxon world or also the rest of Europe. And one of the arguments that he made was that there was a widespread understanding and really engagement with inner development, that there was probably around 20% of the population that had gone through something that we would probably call an inner development retreat today. And so when the revolution happened and a lot of changes happened and a lot of power shifts came, that's why societies developed a little bit different. And I think this is one of the kind of founding truths or founding principles behind the IDGs, that what we see is we're going through a time of massive like change and accelerating revolutions. And we want to bring a bigger scale to those who have access to this kind of inner development work. And then another day, the designer of the UN SDGs actually joined the conversation. And he kind of came in and said, you know, the SDGs in a way are a language for a complex field of the external change of that that we want to see. And that's really what it does. It gives the ability of an activist to talk to a government, to talk to a city level, municipality, mayor, to talk to someone from the private sector. And then the idea was really quickly on the table of asking, what is that language of that inner change that we're looking for? And that's where the idea of the IDGs comes from. And together with those people in that conversation who had contact with some of the leading people in adult development, like Bob Keegan or Amy Edmondson or Otto Scharmer, together they created this survey that then was filled out by over 4,000 people. And that then became the basis of the first IDG framework. I think we have the framework, we have a slide of the framework that I can also show here. And when that hit the internet...
These have actually been designed by the same designer who did the SDGs.
Exactly.
Which is quite interesting. So the same team.
Exactly. Yeah. Are you sharing the framework, Komi, or should I?
Let's go ahead, Daniel. Can you do it?
Yes, I got it here. So then you can see here is the framework. You can also see the next slide. Sorry, I don't know how to put it in full screen mode, but you can see here this framework. I mean, we can see that we have 23 skills in total. So while the SDGs have 17 boxes, we have 23. And they're ordered in 5 dimensions. The first dimension is being, then thinking, relating, collaborating, and acting. And in a way, when this kind of just hit the internet, there was a huge wave of responses and enthusiasm, and people really resonated with it from all corners of the world. And we had companies and we had governments coming to us, and they wanted to work with this. I mean, the government of Costa Rica came and they said, we want to implement this side by side with the SDG framework as well in our work. And we had companies like IKEA coming to us and saying, this is really useful for us. And for us, then it became clear that this is actually then how we could possibly reach that massive amount of people. Because if we have such large organizations who, have a big lever and can reach thousands of employees and probably way more than hundreds of thousands of customers or people that they have as stakeholders, this could really get us that scale of engagement that we're looking for. And so that's why the IDGs, this leverage, that's really one of the big parts in our theory of change. And I mean, looking back, sometimes at my younger activist self, I mean, sometimes I would shudder a bit at the idea of, like working with big corporates. I mean, that are not always behaving maybe as like the perfect model citizens today. And, being afraid of co-optation or green or pink or whatever form of washing. And I mean, the thing that I realized working with IDGs is that I'm not working with these organizations. I'm working with people within those organizations that are often or always trying to change something internally. And that these are, exactly the places that we actually need to be, because otherwise these like internal forces, they're going to give up in 4, 5, 6 years if they don't see that, it's often a very lonely journey to transform organizations from the inside.
Yes, and you do this through it's a learning journey for you, right? And you do this also through partnership gatherings. And I heard you doing one annual flagship summit in October in Stockholm too.
Yeah.
I just want to say we're running a little bit short on time.
Yeah.
Got it. Yeah. But
yeah, exactly. I mean, and I think that ties back into then the topic for today. I mean, that really like learning, we're putting that at the center, because if we're looking at like what does an organization in times of complexity really mean, and like what should be the guiding star, then it is really that organizational capacity to learn. And so that's what we're doing in this partnership with not just the companies that are in, but also the governments and the academic institutions, and really building kind of these multi-stakeholder environments for learning. And then we bring it all together in the annual summit that is happening in October.
Yeah, I want to jump in and say that you were used to give an interesting example from my world there. I've just quit as managing a fund for the Queen of Sweden, where the board is set up of perhaps an older generation of 80-year-olds that been ruling they've been living in a world where you did not perhaps think in this way before, and perhaps more of a the like colonial mindset of how you donate money. And I suggested to them when we ended this foundation that we should take part of the last money that we had to invest that in the people where we've been given money to, so that to have a coach slash meditation mindfulness session for the people that work in these organizations to be able to take care of their inner. And to get a board such as that board to agree on this was really amazing. It was no small, it was really beautiful. And I think that more funders, like you talked about IKEA and so on, but also more of the funders that support this world should really, perhaps a coalition of funders need to understand the necessity of this. And because if you really talk about how we could have a systemic impact and change, we need to look, internally and externally, corporations, funders, and so on. And because if we don't, that's everything that we seek in will remain fairly superficial.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm really glad that you bring this up. And I find that quite inspirational that you use, like that kind of remaining funds in this way. And I mean, I see that there is a bit of a change, I think, in our sector where we can bring in more and more of these conversations. I mean, I just joined the Resilience Project, which works with young activists who are struggling with also their mental health. And, now I'm called an intergenerational mentor. Talk about like getting older, like I've come to the other side of the table now. Now I'm, like that part of that duo. But yeah, I think there is really something there that we are understanding, I think, a little bit more about, you know, this challenge or this element, this aspect of making change in the world.
Yeah, and also the intergenerational shifts that we are going through in the whole world. And also, like, I wanted to talking about that. We have in the beginning, I also said that I represent something called Catalyst Collabs, and
Yeah.
just everybody know it's I run that with 2 colleagues, and we actually do a collab right now on psychosocial support and education for children in Gaza now,
Oh, wow.
where we're bringing in experts from around the world. And as a short info on what it is, it's like, and how it connects to the IDGs, but it's Christine Peterson and Winthrop Carter. They're also 2 of the founding members of Catalyst 2030. We have a venture where we seek and find problems or challenges that social entrepreneurs are facing across the world, and then we define them, and then we bring in, we roll out the problem, and we bring in experts from across the world through Catalyst 2030 and other networks that we have to solve them. And by doing this, we help them to, you know, get a wider impact and get connected, and for others to copy the solutions. So for this Gaza collab, which is it's happening now on the 26th and 27th June, we were contacted by NGOs that work in Gaza now and have been throughout the war, to get help how they can find a model to apply offline and for psychosocial support and education for the children that are there, and but also to investigate, like, if what they're doing is really right, but and to also to you know, be able to continue with something once all the bombings have stopped, and because it's an unparalleled situation there. And we have hundreds of applicants from across the world that want to dedicate their free time to these workshops. They're 2 90-minute workshops, and we picked 30 experts from 20 countries. It's a hard pick because there's so many people, but it goes to show that, you know, we have people who want to give their free time and used to work on their inner, as well as at the same time helping other children's inner, and for no fee at all, and to solve someone else's problem. And that's IDGs on so many levels. And because in the end, it's someone else's problem is our problem. It's a global one world. And I know you've also worked in conflict zones with the IDGs or previous conflict zones.
Yeah.
And I know you face a tiny bit of critique that this is that IDGs are a little bit connected to Western thinking, but I know you have you know, in Rwanda, you've been there, and could you tell us a little bit about that, and also that we're running a little bit over time, so.
Yes. Yeah, wow. I mean, first of all, I think that's really wonderful work to, you know, be thinking about that. And as you say, I think it does like tie into sometimes like that a criticism that we hear is, yeah, the inner. I mean, how much does that really matter if, you know, like I'm looking to put food on the table, or, you know, if I'm being bombed at the same time. And I mean, that I'm not saying that that perspective is not valid. But I do think that if we look around the world, there is a bit more of a perspective that, you know, in our Western society of reductionism, of like scientific advancement is kind of the only way that we see progress, and that, you know, we pursue that at all costs, that sometimes is actually, you know, like getting us into these issues. And that if we look around the world, we can see that there are, like in other cultures, and now without exotifying them or putting them, you know, like on a pedestal, like that they sometimes are a bit more in touch with ancient wisdom. They are perhaps a bit more in touch with like a different narrative around decolonialism that has, you know, developed a little bit outside of these kind of traditional centers of power. And I think one way that we've seen that at the IDGs is that the government of Rwanda, they came to us and they really loved the framework, but one day they just asked us, and where is forgiveness? Because obviously forgiveness was a huge part in their process of going from, you know, the genocide there to a relatively stable country that it is today. And so that's also why we realized, okay, we want to then like have an update of the framework that is informed by many more perspectives from around the world. And I mean, we have these like over 400 hubs now around the world where people were just saying like, I want to be part of this IDG journey. And I think sometimes it looks a little bit as if, these hubs exist kind of as extensions of us, as our center, and, like that they are then spreading the gospel from, like that we are inventing in Stockholm. And I think probably nothing could be further from the truth. I mean, to me, I think what is important is that actually these are kind of our sense-making devices in a way that we can actually understand and get many more different perspectives from around the world through actually this movement of the hubs. And I think that is, a much better way to look at that. We're trying to live up to that. And I think that will, in the end, make our movement stronger because, as I said, I think sometimes a lot of the things that maybe are more normal or natural to know in certain places are a bit more forgotten in the West, where, we have oftentimes this very dualistic perspective of, mind, body, inner, outer. I mean, even that idea of inner and outer, that dualism is a bit fake. We call ourselves the inner development goals, but what we're really looking for is that integration of the outer and the inner.
Yeah, we could talk for hours about this. I mean, you're really right. But I have to, unfortunately, end this conversation for now because we're going to move into breakout rooms, where everybody who has been listening so patiently, and I see there's a lot of going on in the chat, which is lovely, but you get a chance to speak to each other. And you are going to be approximately 4 people per room, randomly picked. You will have 15 minutes, more or less, perhaps now 12 minutes, 30 minutes, to have a conversation, and which will give you about 3-4 minutes each. And please, just some rules of the breakout rooms is to remember politeness and allow for different viewpoints without judging, and very important, not to eat up the time and space, but let other people talk so that we can learn from each other. So David, just quickly, could you frame the question that you would like everybody to discuss in the breakout rooms?
Sure, and I really love it that the chat is already so active, and I see Jacob's put a really interesting question there. We will have time for question and answers after this, so we have I think a bit less than 30 minutes then to go into that. So we can get to that, but until then, I mean, and I know that anyway in breakouts probably people are going to discuss whatever they want to discuss, but if you need a little bit of a provocation, I think that question that we had at the end, if, does this really matter? Like, how much do you really think that this working with the inner, given all that is happening worldwide, really matters? And what kind of potential does that hold? Maybe in your own systems change work, where do you stand on that? And maybe that can spark a little bit of a conversation, and then we'll come back together and we'll have a conversation in the big group.
Super. So Komi, or could you please let everybody out into the breakout rooms?
I think so, and we're recording again, so.
Yeah, we're recording, yeah. So welcome back, everyone. Yeah, I had a great breakout room. We have half an hour left, and we're going to move into Q&A with Daniel now, and we're going to leave 20 minutes for this Q&A. And then after that, we're going to follow by information from Daniel how you can get engaged in the IDGs. And so if anyone in the audience has questions, or if someone would like to share what you spoke about talked about in your breakout room, just raise your hand or also use the chat, and we will start. And yes, I think we had one really interesting question in my breakout room, at least, so I know. Just go for it, everyone. Let's see. We have some. And don't be shy to be the first one with your question.
I think Marie has her hand raised.
Oh, perfect.
I'm not sure if the sound was coming from you, Marie. It sounded like there was some German in the background.
No, it wasn't for me. I was on mute there.
Okay.
So yeah, I just I was in Therese breakout group, and one of our fellow participants in that group, Alana, was sharing with us the importance of creating shared understanding, to shift mindsets, and how important language is with that. And I was just sharing that in some of the work I've been doing, I have been getting some pushback from some people internally around some of the language even used by the IDG framework. And I think it's worth mentioning, not to suggest that I think it needs to change, but just that these things will surface, I think, when you do this kind of work. Because, you know, some people may be more externally referenced and enjoy the collaboration and the action piece, and may struggle if we're asking them to think a bit more about being and presencing. But I just wanted to ask if there's any advice, Daniel, on what to do when those kinds of things show up.
I mean, I think that we are facing those kinds of criticisms really every day. I mean, I think that if you would ask anyone, they probably would want the IDG framework to really shift and change in some ways. And so there's a lot of different perspectives on it, and I think it's good to hold those perspectives. I mean, I don't think that, you know, they are necessarily wrong, but I also think that there's something to it that then if, you know, like everyone is a little unhappy, then perhaps we found like a decent compromise then somewhere. But yeah, I think you're right. I mean, I hear it from, you know, people who find it all still a little bit too woo-woo what we're doing. And I find it like that others on the other side, that people are saying like, oh, you're oversimplifying. I mean, especially the academics, you know, like they often come to me and say like, oh, what you're doing, it's, you know, it's not that simple. Like it's much more complicated, and it depends. And then they often launch into at least a 3-minute monologue. And, you know, at the end of it, I'm often just saying like, see, exactly that is why, you know, like this is not how we're going to get people who, you know, come from maybe a bit more of a skeptic point to engage with this. If, you know, like we want to make it simple and easy to get started. And of course, all models, you know, are wrong, and we just want to be useful for people to get started on that journey. And I think that's really where we stand. And yeah, we definitely have to keep or hear a lot of people who have their opinions on it. And I think that's good. And I think, you know, I think one thing that I sometimes miss in, I think, our very polarized talks like today is really just that I also hold the perspective of, you know, what if they're right? You know, what if they're right and I'm wrong? You know, maybe that is true. And, you know, I think that's how I try to then stay compassionate in those kinds of dialogues.
Now we have a question from Matthew Borge.
Yeah.
I don't know if I pronounced that correctly.
Thank you. And I have a question for Daniel, rebouncing on what you said, that we need a simple framework, and I really appreciate the work that has been done. I've been reading extensively all the background of the work and the generation of these skills, the description, all the connection between all the frameworks, etc., etc. But still, we came out with 25 skills, and I'm concerned, and I'm wondering, could we reach something even more simpler?
You're right. I think the simplest one is the 5 dimensions, I think, of the being, thinking, relating, collaborating, and acting. And I think that with the work that we're doing now, I mean, let's say we are going to include forgiveness. You know, that's number 24. And maybe then there's another 1 or 2 lurking as well. So yeah, I think that over the time, the way that I would personally envision it is that there might be different versions of like then the IDGs, and they might shift because our world is also shifting. I mean, this framework was done in a pre-COVID world, right? But what is pretty stable that I understand from also talking to the researchers behind that are the 5 dimensions. So perhaps that can be that bit more simple framework. Does that help a bit, Mathieu?
Yeah, I appreciate that. I do believe indeed that 5 is already enough. And then, but I appreciate the effort of getting precision and being precise in what it means. But
Yeah.
still, when you're turning to people, and that's my second concern, because here again, I'm within a very beautiful crowd of very beautiful people who are deeply concerned and deeply convinced. But on my day-to-day, I'm interacting with people who doesn't give a shit about that. So that's why I'm concerned to bring some kind of easy to understand, easy to get a grasp on what we're talking about here.
Absolutely.
Thank you. And we have a question from Carrie Louise Zimmerman.
Yes, thank you, Therese. Daniel, first of all, thank you for the insight. That was very inspiring. Like, otherwise, I'm just reading about the IDG, etc. And now to really get to know someone who's working in that field, that's pretty great. I do have a question regarding like I'm working at the University of Bremen as lecturer, and my goal is to integrate the IDG into the higher education program for our students of business economics. And I'm just wondering, are there any restrictions of the material that's online that I can use?
No.
No. Okay. So it's all
we're
open
an
source.
open source initiative. Yeah, it's all open source, and you could even use it. I mean, you're coming from the kind of educational sector, but you can even use it commercially.
All right.
And you don't even have to ask for permission. Like, I think that if we want this to be a language that is useful and usable, we cannot, put a wall and a fence around it. Obviously, there's, like something different if you want to say like we're officially aligned with the IDG organization, but the framework is all open source.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Thank you.
See, what do
I see
we have
Lydia has her
anyone?
hand up.
Yeah.
Hi, everyone, and hi, Daniel. Thanks so much for your input. I apologize in case this question was asked before. I had to disconnect for 5 minutes earlier. But I was wondering if has there been any research or any work on making the skills in the framework measurable in a way? Like when is kind of like good enough? If I want to apply this in like a corporate context, like when do we say like, okay, let's say empathy, you have reached your empathy goal, or like personally, like there is no goal, but like, is there any research, any work on that? Be really curious to hear that.
I think there's a lot of this discussion happening around the world in the hubs. I think that there are a lot of people who would like to have something like, an IDG test, like answer 15 questions and I'll tell you what is your strength and what is your weakness. I think, like to have some diagnostic for, understanding where is your organization, but at least just personally speaking, that's not exactly how I look at it. It's really more of a framework for understanding. And I just also see a danger that, like we're then telling a story of, like this kind of hero guru story of like, oh, I just need to become excellent at all these 23 skills, and then I'm going to go out and save the world. That's what I really want to like warn against. But like it's really just like a reflective tool to consider, maybe where are my strengths, where are my weaknesses, what are areas that I want to work in, also not just individually, but also as a culture, as an organization and such. And I mean, just like how are we going to measure humility? I think the person that self-describes themselves as the most humble person, like probably they might not exactly be the most humble person, but yeah, I think there's a balance to be struck. I think we will see that probably emerge more and more, that there will be some ways to at least find some kind of assessment on some of these skills, but for now, I would say that we don't really have anything that is like really kind of in this traditional way of, like a third party assessing something or someone or an organization.
I love your view. Thank you.
Thank you.
Sorry.
Elizabeth.
We have Elizabeth Barber has a question as well.
Yes, just actually following up on what has just been said about assessment. Having worked basically my entire life in non-traditional education models, and also really focusing on learner autonomy. And I think it's really important to have assessments pretty much for everything, but absolutely agree with everybody who is saying, let's do this, let's have a different paradigm. Let's do this in a way that, A, we are facilitating our learners' progress, okay? How do we measure progress? Through assessment. I mean, that is the traditional way, but let's think of ways that we can do it. And I love a number of people have already said, yeah, we've done this or we've done that, but always remembering that learner autonomy is really important, but it's constantly interdependent and within a community. So we're not just saying, oh, well, I'm great because I've reached whatever, but rather in our community, I am part of a sustainable relationship.
Yeah, I would definitely second that.
Okay.
I also saw a really interesting question, I think, of Jacob in the chat. I don't know if she's still here, but I think like my short answer to that will be absolutely yes. I think all inner development is just really hard. I think if it's not hard, it's probably you're not developing enough. I don't know, but yeah, this stuff is really difficult, and I think that's why there is a lot of resistance also, and you know, kind of that immune system kicks in of like, yeah, no, I want to hold on to that person who I used to be, because you know, obviously I like that person, or at least some parts of that person who I used to be, and I'm scared to go into developing and becoming something new, right? And so yeah, I think it's absolutely about that. You know, we need to give up a little bit of comfort if we want to develop.
Thank you. I think we need to move on a little bit to just, I would like to, because I would really like to hear from you. I think everybody wants to know how we can get involved and engaged across the world where we're sitting. And if you would like to talk a little bit more about that, we have about 10 minutes left. And
good.
Yeah. And if there are any questions, please post them in the chat if there are any more.
So first of all, I see in the chat, my email is daniel@innerdevelopmentgoals.org. So if you have something, please follow up. The framework, as I said, is all open source. You don't even need to ask for permission to use it. If it's useful, if it resonates, really feel free to use it. And as I said, you can also use it for commercial use. I mean, should you get rich off of this, perhaps you can donate a little bit back to the IDG movement. But other than that, like, we really want, you know, people this to be useful for people. And I mean, you know, we all need to live and pay our rent and do these things. So please use it as it is useful. If you're a funder, I mean, we are building a coalition of philanthropists, of funders who understand this need and this change, because while we see like some first kind of people going ahead in this area, we want to really build a coalition of organizations that understand and fund this, and also understand this when they're looking at their portfolios. Like, so we're working with the BMW Foundation, Templeton Foundation to create this coalition, and we're going to kick off in October on the island where it actually all started. So please get in touch if you're interested in that. Join as an IDG partner. It comes with an annual fee that helps us really kind of do our work. So you can join us. And yeah, anyone here can join us at the IDG Summit as well. It's going to happen from October 16 to 18 in Stockholm. If you use the code IDG23, all capitalized, you get a little discount. I think it's a 15% discount. And I'm going to drop a few links also in here. Komi was already faster than me, wonderful. But Therese, I'm also wondering, I mean, how can people still get engaged in the Gaza collab, and how do they do that?
Actually, no, we closed all the applications already, and we already picked everybody who's in this collab. It's on June 26th and 27th. But you mean, you can, you can always reach us. I'll send the information here to know the outcomes, and we will also post that on our website. But also, I would like to say to everyone, if there's anyone in here who would like to have their own collab, just get in touch, because we always look for problems. We always look for challenges, and it's a genuine process to do a collab. It takes a couple of months to prepare. And I also want to highlight, we never do one on finding funding, but it also has to be always have to be a tangible problem that we can define well, and that can scale, and most of all can also be beneficial to others. But yes, and so please get in touch if you want to have a collab done for you. And we might have more on Gaza, but it all depends on the funding and what happens. But yeah. Oh,
Wonderful.
Thomas says, please remind us what a collab is. So that is a problem solving, two 90-minute sessions online, and perhaps more than that, where a person or a social entrepreneur or an NGO who has a problem will reach out to us, and we will define clearly this problem. And then we send this challenge out to our networks across the globe. And we look for experts that join to, for free, solve this challenge or problem. And then usually we have about 30, maximum 30 experts in a collab. And then you're the host, you would be the host of your problem and challenge. And everybody would put their brains together to try to solve it for you. And we actually have everything from, really across the world. So they're usually at 4 p.m. CET, so that people sitting in Asia and South America and New Zealand to Sweden can meet. And it's a pretty amazing process. And usually people come with funding when they do that, but sometimes, such as Gaza, we had the problem. They reached out to us and wanted our help, and we helped them get funding. So this has been funded by private donors and the UN, for example. So I'm going to post my contact details here as well.
Great. I see Nima's question, and I know we're running short on time, and that we need a little bit of time also for Komi to close out. But Nima, I think it's a really important question. One thing that I also do think sometimes is that the IDGs are probably most needed in the places where most power and responsibility for the way that is currently in the world. So I think we have this open source part, we have the hubs movement, but there's also something I think to be said, that we don't want this to come across as like that now Sweden is setting an agenda for how the rest of the world should develop. But it is much more that we are trying to, have a process of, look, this, like the in the Western world, if we want to lead a transition to a more sustainable, a more equitable future, this needs to be part of that conversation. And I think in a lot of other places in the world, there is already a bit more of awareness for these truths that we see.
Yeah.
They might not need us, is what I'm saying.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much, everyone, Daniel, and everyone who's been participating and asking questions, and then who is already engaged and who are in schools teaching their children to the people that are going to be out there working, and eventually that they already come with this mindset. That's amazing, I think. But now we're going to hand over to Komi, who is going to close this. And yes, thank you, everyone.
And thank you, Therese. And thank you, Therese, for coming, for moderating, for hosting, for holding this space. It's been really wonderful to be here with you.
Yeah, thank you. It's a pleasure and an honor.
Thank you for your participation. So please take out 1 minute to tell us how engaging this space were for you. And then when you doing your whole survey, so let's remind you about the upcoming Wellbeing Series. So to foster a culture of well-being and advancement aligned with the connection with music, nature, organizational and personal well-being. So please join us for our upcoming well-being sessions, where members can freely share your insights and experience. And also, so the social change innovators online resource you can discover to explore the wealth of information and resources created by social entrepreneurs. And finally, don't forget to join Catalyst 2030 community and by follow this link. Thank you for joining our session today, and we wish everybody peace and energy to keep up your great work. Thank you so much. Let's say how to say thank you in our own language.
Tack.
Yeah, thank you.
Dankeschön.
Shukriya.
Vielen Dank.
Cảm ơn.
Thank you. Gracias.
Yeah.